For some of us, the austerity years never went away, but austerity is coming back, and we're going to have to fight to stop it. Reason number one, there's a lot of kite flying going on. By kite flying, I mean that the government leaks things to the media. Oh, there's talk of cuts to the PUP. Oh, there's talk of budget oversight. Talk of cuts here and cuts there, and changes here and changes there. So what they do is they fly kites, they put things out in the media, and they see what the temperature's like. They see what the response is like. They see how angry we get on social media, or in some cases, if we take to the streets. And then if there's no reaction, they say, sure, they don't care, we'll get away with this one, and they go for it. So there's been a hell of a lot of kite flying over the past few weeks, which all indicates that there will be cuts. Reason number two, the Tories have done it. We all know how much Leo Varadkar worships Margaret Thatcher. And whenever the Tories do anything, our government is quick to follow. The Tories applauded NHS nurses, but now want to freeze public sector pay. It's a nice way to reward the frontline workers, isn't it? And with inflation set to return, meaning that prices, rents and everything else, bills are going to go up, a pay freeze is a pay cut. If the price of everything goes up and your wage stands still, you've lost out. This pay freeze was recommended to the Tories by the right-wing Centre for Policy Studies. They told the Tories that they could steal £23 billion sterling from the public sector pay. Imagine that, after all the work the nurses have done to steal 23 billion from their pay packets. But that's what a pay freeze amounts to. A few weeks after the Tories announced their pay freeze, what does Pascal Donoghue do? He announces that there needs to be a renegotiated pay deal in Ireland which would include a pay freeze. So they're just following what the Tories do. And what a reward for our hard-working frontline workers, our nurses and doctors, that the government rewards them with increased prices, rents, bills and a pay freeze, an effective cut in their pay. And even if the public sector pay deal gave people a marginal pay rise, if it's under the rate of inflation, people are being ripped off. Pascal O'Donoghue said, well, the background has changed since the last pay deals were negotiated. That's just code for cuts are coming. And you might think, well, what does public sector pay have to do with me if I'm a private sector worker or if I'm unemployed? The most unionised sections of the working class set the pay levels for the rest of the working class. If the government can beat the public sector workers and get them to accept wages that are falling behind inflation, then the rest of us will suffer. Reason number three, there's austerity coming. Michael McGrath, the Minister for Public Expenditure, has already said to all the departments, expect Troika-style budget oversight. Remember the Troika, the IMF and all, the EU, who were in here overseeing our budgets, telling us what to cut, telling the government who to kick in the face? Well, Michael McGrath has already told all the cabinet ministers to expect that kind of strict budget oversight. But that's a sign of what's to come then. He's already told them that in the next budget they're going to have to make up about 12 billion. And what, you think they're going to go after Dennis O'Brien and Larry Goodman or close the tax loopholes for vulture funds and corporations? You're a bit naive if you think they're going to do that. No. It'll be down to you and me to pay. From the working class pensioner who's worked their whole life and paid for crisis after crisis after crisis, to young people who were in school during the bank bailout but are now going to have to pay for this crisis and pay for it with the loss of their futures. Reason number four, the big players in the EU like France want to push the cost of Brexit onto Ireland. Food co-ops are already reporting 8% higher costs, and there's 8 to 13% higher costs on exports. And these companies who are feeling a bit of pressure on their profits will want to cut their workers' wages. But the EU fund, the Brexit Adjustment Reserve Fund, which has 5.4 billion in it, to help countries ease them through the trials and tribulations of the coming Brexit economic turbulence. Ireland was allocated 1 billion out of that fund. But France is already demanding that the Irish allocation be slashed so that they can get more. Because they want to, fund their fisheries and make sure that they don't take any economic hit from Brexit. And the EU works according to what the big players like France and Germany dictate that it does. The EU suspended their strict budgetary oversight and fiscal rules for 2021 and 2022. But they've already told countries that those fiscal rules are back in place for 2023. And those fiscal rules constrain public spending and demand austerity. And who is it that always has to pay? Who was it that paid 42% of the entire European banking crisis? Us here, the Joe Soaps of Ireland. Reason number 5. Since the late 1960s and early 70s, profit rates for all the corporations across the world have slowly been falling. That's why you've got bubbles and crashes and bubbles and crashes and bubbles and crashes. You see, like if you make iPhones and you invest millions in technology and machinery so that you can make your iPhone cheaper and cheaper and cheaper so that you can undercut your rivals. When you first make an iPhone that's cheaper than your rival's iPhone, you corner the market and you get a bit of extra profit. But once everybody is making the cheaper phone, the margin for profit that you make on it is just going to go down and down and down and down. And so you can see a trend whereby the return or the profit that the big corporations are making has been going down since the 1960s. That's what neoliberalism is about. People like Thatcher and Reagan went on the assault against the working class to try and get their profits back up. That's what austerity was all about after the bank bailout. It's all about getting the profits up. And so the government will be worried about stirring up public anger. So they'll probably go for austerity by stealth at first, like pay freezes for example. But then they'll start going for what they went for after the last bank bailout, the low-hanging fruit, the old, the sick, the vulnerable. But actually the Grey Army, when they went for the medical cards, showed how to push them back, didn't they? The government went for medical cards after the bank bailout and 15,000 pensioners stormed the Dáil. They were screaming and shouting outside those gates. And it made the government retreat, which is a lesson for us all, isn't it? Never underestimate what you can achieve if you mobilise and get out on the streets. It's time to wake up the army of the working class and poor.